Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Colin Delany. I have been in the digital politics world for a really long time, since the very end of the 20th century, if you want to think of it that way. And I've been working with organizations and campaigns that have needed to grow their email lists and nowadays your text message lists for a good chunk of that time as well. And today we're going to explore how to build your list ethically and effectively. And the emphasis is on both ethical and effective because one of the nice things is that ethical list building tends to be more effective over time. And a good friend of mine, a good friend of mine is joining. Very nice to see. Thanks everyone who could make it today. Again, I'm Colin Delany. I got into digital politics. I got into politics in the early 90s. I got into digital politics in the late 90s. And through that time, I've been a digital strategy consultant. I've been an advocate for causes I care about. I started epolitics.com back in 2006, and it has over 2,500 articles covering digital politics and advocacy. Took a break during the pandemic, but it is relaunched as a Substack, epolitics.substack.com. And of course, epolitics.com is still there. I'm the author of a guide to digital campaigning that I update every year. Hope to have the new version out in the next couple of months. It has 18 odd chapters that cover everything, covers a lot of list building. It covers everything from digital advertising to organic social media to the logistics of setting up budgets for digital campaigns. So I encourage you guys to check that out and look for the new version. If you follow me on Blue Sky or at ePolitics, if you follow me on Blue Sky or Substack, you'll learn about these as they come out. And I've been working with clients, like I said, for a quarter century or so, everything from digital ad strategy, ad placement. I think where I'm probably the most valuable is coming in and helping organizations at a high level sort of figure out how to get where they need to go from where they are right now. Based on their own strengths, weaknesses, and the particular circumstances that they find themselves in. I do digital product program audits, email strategy, social media, and digital project planning. And I just did advertising for a candidate who won a county council race in Prince George's County, Maryland. So congratulations to Shayla Adams Stafford, who will go on to, I'm sure, win the general election in PG County. She's a Democrat and will take office later this year. Very exciting. So with all of that in mind, just a quick background. I got started in that right, the Texas map back in the early 90s. And Texas politics is played as a contact sport. And it has left me with a very pragmatic approach to digital advocacy and digital politics. And I think that'll come through in everything we talk about today. But first, so we're going to talk about a bunch of things. So, what it means to build ethically and effectively, optimizing websites and landing pages. We'll touch on onboarding, testing, and then some particular tactics and strategies, everything from tapping into activist communities like Civic Shout through digital advertising and influencer outreach. But first, let's welcome Josh Nelson, an old friend of mine from Civic Shout. And thanks to Josh for helping to spread the word about this. And he's going to talk about not being a spammer.
Thanks so much, Colin. At the risk of dating myself, I've known Colin since the George W. Bush administration, quite a long time ago. Colin is a great person and a very talented digital strategist, and I would recommend working with him anytime you have the opportunity to do so.
Well, thank you.
Sure thing. Thank you. Hey, everybody. I'm Josh, and I help progressive causes reach and mobilize new supporters. I'm the CEO of Civic Shout, which is the digital ad platform for progressive causes. Before I joined Civic Shout, I co-founded a list rental and digital advertising company called the Juggernaut Project. I served as vice president at Credo Mobile, and I led digital for Al Gore's nonprofits. In those roles and others, I spent many years working with every list growth vendor out there. Over and over again, I found that growing email lists was too hard, too expensive, and too time consuming. That's why I partnered with a talented engineer and built the platform I always wanted. Over the past 3 years, Civic Shout has helped more than 600 progressive causes grow their opt-in email lists. That includes many of the most prominent nonprofits in the United States, like Greenpeace USA, Amnesty International, Human Rights Campaign, and Feeding America, among many others. Environmental Action called Civic Shout a wildly better way to grow your email list, and Clarify Agency saw a 200% return on ad spend in just 2 months. For the first few years, we focused exclusively on helping our partners grow their opt-in email lists. Then late last year, we introduced a new ad unit called Express CPC for driving traffic to your website or landing page. It's a great option for advocacy campaigns, webinar or volunteer recruitment, surveys or polls, and much more. You can learn more about Civic Shout at civicshout.com/partners. Today, I'm going to do a lightning round version of the case against spam. I'll briefly touch on 5 different reasons you shouldn't send unsolicited emails or texts. If you're in a position to make decisions about an email program or on behalf of a campaign or organization, I hope what I share today will help persuade you that sending unsolicited spam is not worth the risks and consequences. If you're not the decision maker in your organization, I hope you're able to use the information I share today to help persuade your boss or colleagues that unsolicited spam should not play a role in your email program. Reason number 1, not to spam. People you spam are far less responsive than people who sign up to hear from you. If someone didn't sign up for your email or SMS list, they probably don't want to receive your emails or text messages. That means they're less likely to do all the things you want them to do, from easy things like opening your emails, clicking links, and signing petitions, to harder things like voting, volunteering, or donating. I've talked with dozens of consultants who run email acquisition campaigns on behalf of clients. Many of them have told me that supporters who opt in to receive emails are typically 3 to 10 times more responsive than people who don't. That means contacts you spam are typically just 10 to 33% as responsive as those you email with permission. So if you're used to a 30% open rate with your opt-in supporters and you buy a list and start spamming it, you should expect a dismal open rate somewhere between 3 and 10%. Reason number 2, spamming alienates and annoys potential supporters. I want you to think for a moment about the last time you received an impersonal email or text message you didn't sign up for. Maybe it was a company trying to sell you their services. Maybe it was a seemingly random political campaign in another state asking you for a donation. How did that make you feel? Did it make you feel appreciated or respected? Did you end up buying the product or making the donation? I bet you didn't. Even worse, it probably made you think less of whoever sent it to you, whether that was a company, an individual, or a campaign. We've known anecdotally for many years that people are sick and tired of receiving unsolicited spam. Now we've got survey data that proves it. In 2022, Civic Shout conducted a survey with Coast Media and Civics to better understand how Democrats and independents experience political emails and text messages. The results were striking. 57% of independents and 59% of 18 to 34-year-olds agreed with the following statement: I get too many impersonal emails and text messages that I never signed up for. When asked whether Democratic campaigns should send emails and text messages to people who didn't sign up to receive them, a resounding 60% said no, while 18% said yes and 22% were unsure. We also asked voters to describe in detail how they feel when they get emails from candidates they have not chosen to hear from. Here's some of what they told us. It makes me want to never donate again. I did not vote for any of the candidates that were harassing me by email and text. It is very annoying and counterproductive to building meaningful relationships with voters, volunteers, and donors. I find it very annoying, and it makes it clear my email has been shared or sold without my permission. It makes me extremely annoyed and less likely to donate or volunteer. That's just a few of the hundreds of responses along the same lines we heard from Democratic and independent voters. Here's the bottom line on this one. Everybody hates spam. Don't be a spammer unless you want people to hate you and your organization or candidate. Reason number 3, spamming harms Democratic campaigns and other progressive groups. There's one other key finding I want to share from the polling I mentioned. 24% of all respondents agreed with the statement, quote, there have been times when I have decided not to donate to or volunteer for a Democratic campaign because that just means I'll get more emails and text messages. Think about that one for a second. 1 in 4 Democrats and independents declined to donate or volunteer because they were afraid of getting more fundraising spam. That amounts to a massive tax on every single Democratic campaign's fundraising potential. One thing that often gets lost in these conversations is that spam email and text from congressional campaigns are actively harming down-ballot campaigns. In 2022, a campaign manager for a Black woman running for state Senate in Rhode Island went on social media and shared this concern. Quote, "Can I just express my immense frustration at the large, well-funded campaigns that have abused inexpensive voter outreach tools like email and text? Down-ballot races are just as important as large congressional races, and now it is so much harder to contact voters because they're constantly being ambushed by campaigns who bought lists from somewhere and relentlessly send emails 14 times a day." End quote. At the end of the day, there are a finite number of potential donors to Democratic campaigns and progressive causes, and those individuals can only read and engage with so many emails and text messages per day. As political campaigns inundate them with higher and higher volumes of spam texts and emails, they're making it harder for everyone else, including nonprofits, to break through the noise and raise money from their members who signed up to hear from them. Reason number 4 not to spam: it's harmful to your ability to reach inboxes. Email deliverability is the ability to deliver emails to subscribers' inboxes. Maintaining strong deliverability is a crucial aspect of running any email program. After all, if you can't get your emails into people's inboxes, there's no way for them to see the emails or do what you're asking them to do. And it turns out sending unsolicited spam is the absolute worst thing you can do for your deliverability. There are a number of signals that email service providers like Gmail and Yahoo take into account when it comes to email deliverability. There are some positive signals like opens and clicks. If people are opening and clicking at high rates, that tells the ESP that you're running an engaging, high-quality email program. But as we discussed earlier, when you spam people, they tend to open and click at very low rates. ESPs also look at negative signals, and the big one is spam reports. If people don't expect or want to receive your emails, they're more likely to report them as spam. Here's how Gmail put it recently: "Nobody likes spam, and Gmail already includes many tools that keep unwanted messages out of your inbox." Needless to say, if your emails are buried in recipient spam folders, you can't raise any money or communicate via email at all. Reason number 5, and this is the last one: spam is prohibited by your CRM. Sending unsolicited spam is very likely a violation of the terms of service of the technology you use to send emails. Many campaigns and groups use NGP or Every Action to send their emails. Here's what their terms of service say. Quote, "You agree to send emails through the NGP system only to recipients who have requested to receive emails from you." A few years ago at a Netroots Nation panel I moderated, one of their senior staff was even more explicit. He said, "If you upload email addresses, if you're sending to people who are not opted in, we will definitely block you." Another big CRM progressive groups and Democratic campaigns uses Action Network. Their acceptable use policy specifies that users are prohibited from, quote, "sending unsolicited emails to email addresses belonging to individuals or entities with whom you have no pre-existing relationship." Action Network expanded on that reasoning in a public statement. Quote, "We believe in respecting email inboxes and the progressive community, and that spamming is bad for donors, bad for deliverability, and bad for our partners. Any other CRM you might consider is going to have similar prohibitions in place." Here's the bottom line on CRMs and spam. Getting kicked off your email platform for being a spammer is the absolute last thing any campaign or organization needs. That's all I've got. If you've got questions or want to get in touch, you can reach me at josh@civicshout.com. And if you want to learn more about Civic Shout, check us out at civicshout.com/partners. Thanks again, Colin.
Hey, Josh, thanks so much. That was very helpful. Yeah, the point about the terms of service, especially, the enforcement is always the key there. But you do not. I have had a client worked with someone who, before I was there, had ended up in spam jail, and we were trying to get them out. They had had some bad practices, unfortunately, and it was a real pain. You do not want to end up with spam jail, and you can be in spam jail with one provider and not another. I think, for instance, this group had problems with Yahoo, but not so much with AOL or Gmail. And you watch your spam complaint rates, watch your open and unsub rates like a hawk. It is serious business. If you can't reach your people, you lose the connection with them. So thanks again, Josh. I really appreciate it. And there'll be links to Civic Shout in the follow-up messages I send, where I send a link to the recording as well. So, and just a quick note, once again, thanks everyone for being here. And if you have questions or you'd like to contribute to the conversation, I really encourage folks to ask questions and help each other out. Please go in the chat, and I'll be checking that periodically and answering questions as they come up. All right, so let's dive back in. So Josh has touched on most of these points, so I'm just going to go through them quite quickly. Effective list building means you're recruiting the right people, means it's reasonable cost in time and money. Remember, everything you do has a cost in time. And then it's sustainable over the life of the campaign. If you're running a political campaign, it's one thing. If you're running a nonprofit, you may be, your time horizon may be in years, right? I was just talking with a group yesterday that has been around for a long time, and many of their donors have been giving for 30 or 40 years. And now their problem is to try to figure out how to recruit new folks to replace them as they start to drop out of the donor pool. And then ethical, no scamming. One thing that we saw a lot last fall, and it was a bad practice by both Democrats and Republicans, was campaigns that would pre-check the recurring donor setting on donation pages so that people would find themselves donating monthly when they had meant to only donate once. That is scamming, and it is a terrible practice, and campaigns had to give back, in some cases, millions of dollars. You do not want to be doing that. It also burns a bridge right away. You want content that does not stray too far from reality. You will see sometimes, particularly the Trump campaign, love to do, all kinds of little meet Donald Trump, have dinner with Trump, or they had 10x matches, i.e. your dollar will be matched 10 times over. Kind of unbelievable in both cases. I don't think there's any evidence that Trump ever met with a grassroots donor. And there's no evidence that saying that you have a 10-fold match outperforms saying you have a 2 or 3-fold match. Make it believable. Don't abuse the audience, as Josh said, opt-in only. Ethical list building is sustainable list building. Okay. Oh, great. We have one question in the chat real quick. We will go back to that in a little bit. Okay, so again, Josh has touched on most of this already. I just want to emphasize this point that if you are sending to a lot of people who don't open your emails, it is going to affect all the rest of your email communications, and it probably violates the terms of use, again, as Josh said. So it's not just ethical, it's not just a question of ethics, it's a question of practical effectiveness. Okay. So how can you use that purchase list ethically? And you can use, so you have bought a list of Democratic donors, say, or you have merged with, perhaps somehow ended up with your hands on another organization or a dead campaign's list. Generally, you don't want to be spamming them, but you can upload it to Facebook as a custom audience and target those people with advertising and try to recruit them via the ads. We'll talk more about that as we go. But this is, there may be other ways that I can think of that I haven't thought of, but this is the main way that you can actually use a purchase list ethically and potentially effectively. So what does ethical and effective mean? Well, we need to know what the effective part is. If we're going to know that, we need to be able to measure it. So typically you're going to measure cost per acquisition, the cost to get this new supporter, cost per donation over a period of time. If you are spending $3 to acquire someone and they're giving on average $2.50 over the first year, you may not see that as a plus, or you may see it as a plus depending on what your time horizon is. If you're really thinking of their value over 5 years, then the value in the first year just gives you a rough estimate of what they're going to do over time. Cost per dollar raised, again, the cost of acquiring someone versus the average cost of donations they make over a given period of time. And you may have other conversion metrics, right? We're just talking about fundraising right here, but it might be volunteer shifts. If you're an advocacy focused organization that's not as focused on grassroots fundraising, you might be measuring the number of advocacy actions or the quality of the advocacy actions people take, i.e., people who just click a link to send an email to Congress versus people who go through a calling tool that you have and call their member of Congress, right? So we want to be measuring this over time. And I want to differentiate a little bit between email and text messaging, because I'm going to talk mostly about email, but much of what I'm going to say is going to apply to text messages as well. But text, you have some other options too. You can always ask for text, people's cell phone numbers at when they join your list during the sign up process, or you can make it a part of the welcome series or other onboarding. Now, you can also, though, especially if you're a grassroots organization, you do a lot of local events, or you're a political campaign that's out on the ground, you can do both in person. And I really recommend, if you're going to be doing a lot of events, having someone there with an iPad or some other tablet that will allow you to get people into your database right on the spot, right? If you're using Action Network, for instance, you could have the sign up form right there on the iPad, let people fill in their information. And that way you don't have to worry about reading their handwriting if they write it down on, a sign up sheet. You can do the same thing while you're canvassing, and things like the minivan and some of the other canvassing apps will let you collect this kind of information when you're talking. If you're at big events and you're doing broadcast texting, you might have people, send a message to a certain short code. You see this a lot at like concerts that are organized for like voter registration, that kind of thing. People, it's not quite as convenient to get an email address from a crowd like that, but text messages to a short code can work well. And typically, even if you're building the SMS, SMS does have, text messages do have some limits. You can only send, so much information. And, since this is buzzing in someone's pocket, you're going to burn them out if you hit them too often. So often what you'll see is email for long-term communication, long-term education of our activists and donors. Social media as well, maintaining that sort of connection. And then the text is maybe what sparks immediate action. However, still, I think for most of us, email is the bread and butter. We certainly saw, as Josh was alluding to, text abuse, particularly last fall. I mean, my phone number was getting shopped around, I don't even know to how many different organizations. And this is how we burn out a donor pool, right? And this is how, as Josh said, national organizations can basically cannibalize donations that might have gone to a local candidate who could use the money more, right? An organization that's raising tens or hundreds of millions of dollars a month, one donation is just a drop in the bucket. But for someone who's running for state legislature or city council, that donation may make a big difference. So please don't abuse the privilege. So before we dive in, before I dive in, let me take a second and look at the chat here. Yes, what counts as an opt-in? What counts as an opt-in? Could a gift be considered opting into a non-profit communication plan? I would still have an express opt-in selection, because, like, for instance, I have a good friend who donates to campaigns and Democratic organizations, but does not want to get on anybody's list. So still having an opt-in, I think is essential, right? And very cool to see in the chat that folks are helping out right there. Thanks, Josh, for jumping in. So let's go back here and let's talk about before we are starting to reach out to people, we need to lay the groundwork so that we're going to be able to convert as many of them as we can. Now, this is a sample website from a Democratic member of Congress. It's his campaign website. So you can see here the emphasis on recruiting, right? And note that the join the email list link only collects email and zip code right at the start. If you were to sign up, you would get prompted later in the process to add more information. But the more information you ask for up front, the less likely someone is to actually complete the process, right? If you ask for 10 things in your sign up form, you're likely to see a lot of drop off. Where if you can just ask for a couple of things, and then maybe on a second page, if your email system, your mass email, your CRM allows for that, or you can do it in a follow-up message, as I mentioned. It'll often work a lot better. So basically, ask for as little as you need, right, at the start. Email, obviously, so you can stay in touch. Zip code, so you can geolocate people. For instance, if you're going to send an action alert to people only in one state. You also notice from this the prominence of the Contribute Now button. You'll see donate buttons are often red. Red tends to catch the eye. I think the sort of behavioral explanation is that red is the color of blood, so we're very sensitive to it. But if you look around, sometimes you'll see orange, sometimes you'll see a bright green, but you'll see a whole lot of donate buttons that are red. So don't make someone look to see how to sign up for your list, right? Make it as easy as possible for them. And to the extent that you can actually include the sign up form on every page, it's better, right? Just to have I've got a little Substack sign up in the right-hand column of my own website. So it's just, you're trying to reduce the barriers to action, making it as easy as possible. And another key part is, now this is just, your overall, background list building, your website, people are visiting your site, maybe on their own, right? You just want to be ready to convert as many of them as possible. But then you have landing pages. And landing pages, now this is the general donation page for the National Women's Law Center, where I worked it's hard to believe I worked there 15 years ago. But it's an organization that has really become, quite digitally sophisticated in the last few years. The thing to know about this landing page is the simplicity. Now, I've cropped the screenshot a little bit, but the normal NWLC navigation links were not at the top of this page. That that you have as few distractions as possible. And note the monthly, annual, and one-time options. Note the pay with a bank account, PayPal, or a credit card. That's quite cool that you didn't used to see that quite as much. But the other thing I want to point out is the validation information, the charity navigator bug, and the candid transparency bug down there. All of these, it looks like they're using every action. Yeah. Actually, I could be wrong. I'm not going to say. I could be completely wrong, so I'm not even going to try to guess. But this kind of validation information, if someone is kind of on the fence whether to donate, this can help push them over the top that their money is going to go to someone who's going to spend it responsibly. Another kind of validation you'll sometimes see is like a scrolling list of recent donors, usually not their full name, but maybe their initials or something and the amount that they gave. And again, this builds that kind of crowd validation. So keep your landing pages focused and eliminate anything extraneous, but include everything that might help tip someone over the top. And for any sort of outreach process, in this case, it's an ad from about 10 years ago, way back in the way on back, a Hillary Clinton campaign ad that ran on Facebook. This ad started the process. This was the landing page that you would go to if you clicked on that ad. So the same photo, same basic colors. And you might say, well, maybe that was their default. But no, this was what the default campaign looked like. Different photo, a little bit different text, The idea with the landing page echoing the ad is that it reassures someone that they're part of the same process, that you're not taking them somewhere that they weren't expecting. So this is just one of those little bits of validation that helps people feel like they are safe in joining a list or making a donation. So that brings us from landing pages, brings us to the onboarding, right? Now, onboarding doesn't help you get more new people, but in theory, at least, it helps you get more out of each person who joins your list, right? So that first contact after someone signs up is really, really critical. With emails, you'll sometimes see as high as a 50 or 60% open rate on the very first message. Often, the first message someone receives from you will have the highest open rate of any message you ever send out, right? So think very carefully about what you want to put in that. In some cases, people send a donation ask right away. In other cases, they may try to get you on their social channels. Or if someone has signed up via email, you may be asking for a text. Or perhaps you have a social ask for them. Here's a piece of content. Please share it on Facebook. But just think through very carefully what you're asking people to do, because these are the most crucial moments. And now I worked with that same organization that had landed in spam jail. They had a number of practices. They had slipped into a number of habits that were not so great. Let's just put it that way. At one point, they did a major list acquisition, worked with an online community to recruit a lot of people, and then they didn't send them a message for 6 months, right? And so by the time people received that message, they had already forgotten all about the whole thing. The quicker you can contact somebody, the better. And now you're often with a sign up going to very quickly, like right away, send a confirmation or acknowledgement. But you want to get that welcome series or even just a single welcome message sent out as quickly as you can. And then you also want to be hitting people with chances to move up the ladder of engagement, right? To start giving you time to start taking advocacy actions. I can't stress enough how important that these first few contacts someone has with you are. They sort of set their level, they set their expectations for what you're going to send. And it also you're basically beginning the process of managing a long-term relationship, right? When you're running an email list or you're running social media accounts, you really are managing relationships at a large scale. So we talked about the effectiveness part. So let's talk about ways that we can, work on the effectiveness and understand it. This is a little chart from an article someone wrote for my website, ePolitics, about list swaps back, and we're going to talk about why a list swap isn't quite what it sounds like, but they were measuring the open rate of messages that they sent out to people who had been acquired through different means, right? So the list swap there's the baseline. I forget what the acquisition was, but the green there is the Facebook ads. So the people that they got by partnering with another organization responded a lot more than people they got in via a Facebook ad. Now, that is this organization and these messages at that time. I'm not trying to say that any one tactic is always going to perform better than another, but this is how you find out what's been working for you, is tracking where people come from. And if you don't know how to do that, talk with tech support at the CRM, mass email, mass texting system that you use. But you'll basically be tagging people in the database based on how they come onto your list, so that you can then look at the long-term performance of these different acquisition channels. And then another testing process, of course, and this is, I'm sure, what you heard a lot more about, is A/B testing. In this case, it's this little schematic is of a landing page test. The hypothesis is that orange may have a different conversion rate than green. So let's send half the people to the orange version and half the people to the green version, and then we measure the conversions. Now, very often you don't see really big differences in things, right? So that tells you it probably doesn't matter as much. And I would want to run any given test several times, at least 2 or 3 times, because you can always get statistical outliers there. And like the difference between 11% and 12% may not actually be significant if you're only, testing a relatively small list. But very often you'll see big differences where, a given subject line in an email, for instance, doubles your open rate, or, changing the photo on an ad can double the click rate, right? But these are the kind of things that we can test to, as we evaluate our program and decide where to go after our first steps. And this is a quick example of a Facebook A/B test that I did on a project several years ago. Um, the You'll notice the photo is the same, but the text is different. So in this case, we isolated a variable. We picked a photo that had worked pretty well for us before, and then we tried different text versions to see which messages were going to resonate. And in this case, because we spent the same amount of money on each, and Facebook rewards engaging content, we reached a lot more people with the job message and with the clean energy message, right? So that told us that with the audience that we were reaching, the job message was working a little better. And again, this is the kind of thing you can do on Facebook. You can do it in emails. Just come up with a hypothesis and then figure out a way to set up the test so you isolate your variables. Okay, so let's check before we dive into the actual channels. Let's check the chat here. Paula Brandner has a good comment here. Someone asks, an upload of folks who opted in gets delayed by a mistake. A delay after sign up would prompt you to think it's better not to email them at all. That is an excellent, excellent question. I don't know if there's a rule of thumb out there. I mean, if you wait a week, it's probably not too bad. If you wait 6 months or a year or something like that, you may want to think carefully about how you frame the first message, where you might even start with an apology in the subject line. We're so sorry you haven't heard from us, something like that. You might try pulling out a random segment of the list and testing some subject lines to see if you get a bunch of spam complaints. That would be one thing. Actually, that's probably the first thing I would try, would be to do a sample of the list and send a message to a smaller number of people and see what kind of response you get. But this is an excellent question. There is any advice on matching email and cell to the voter files? Many consultants will claim to do this. And also Facebook does it, right? Actually, not to the voter file, but you can do a voter file export and try to match it to Facebook. The data companies can generally do this kind of. The thing is, like, if you look at the van, there are only a certain, maybe half of the people have email addresses, maybe half will have cell phone numbers, probably more cell phone numbers than email addresses at this point are in the van. So if the database that you're matching against has someone's email address or cell number, it is potentially, it's potentially matchable, but very often, we're using different email addresses for different purposes. People don't change cell numbers as much as they used to, but still that can happen too. I would want to check the details of how, I would check the details of how they're actually mechanically going to do it. But that's a great, great, great question. And just a reminder, the question is matching back to the voter file. And we're welcoming a couple of more folks to the training, so thank you for joining. Okay, so let's dive back. I know there's another question, but we'll get to it in just a bit. So let's now finally, we've set up our background, the website's working, the landing pages are working. So let's talk about actual acquisition strategies now. So an old rule of thumb is that advocacy can build the list, right? In this case, it's a Facebook ad linking to a petition. Particularly if you are able to catch a wave, a petition sign up, an email Congress, a call Congress action, that might, if it is able to kind of flash over into an audience that you haven't been reaching before, it may, sometimes we will get this kind of flood of support. But just more generally, getting your advocacy actions out there, asking your supporters to share them, right? Emailing them out, texting them out, sending people a one-click share link, like click here to share this on Facebook. Eventually, they'll have something like that for Blue Sky. They have it for Facebook and Twitter now. But anything you can do to broaden the spread of your advocacy actions, trying to get partners to share it. If you're working with other grassroots organizations that have big followings, if there's any way they can share it, and we'll talk about how you can partner up in just a bit. But advocacy for a lot of groups is a long-term way to build the list. So that behooves you to always have some actions for people to take on your website and on your social media pages. So this leads naturally into this question of list swaps. And it's a misnomer because very rarely are you going to send someone a spreadsheet of your supports, right? More and them send you theirs. More often, you're going to do a joint action where maybe you email your list about your partner and your partner emails their list about you, and you both grow your list that way. This kind of thing can be hard for nonprofits sometimes. We tend to get very jealous of our lists. We think of our list as a thing, where I tend to think of a list as a process because people are constantly leaving and joining. And there are a lot of ways in which we can all grow together, right? If you're a naturally simpatico ally, the action alerts that they're sending may well prime people for your action alerts too, right? But in any case, joint actions you can also have a petition or a call Congress action or a leave your story action that both groups promote, and then there's an option for anyone who takes the action to opt in to both groups, right? So that then you're both gaining the benefit of jointly promoting this. And I have a little screenshot from an email. Unfortunately, I forget who it was. It may have been Ultraviolet. It may have been National Women's Law Center. But in this case, they teamed up with Democracy for America to build signatures. And in this case, both groups would have benefited. DFA, gets a chance for their folks to take action, and the list that I received this from, DFA is potentially going to benefit from people from that list who take the action, and the DFA has a pretty big list, so the email that I received organization is going to benefit as well. So it's really the obstacles are often more cultural than logistical. It's organizations feeling like they can team up and it'll be benefit to both. But this is another clip from the article on list swaps on my website from a few years ago. But in this case, this consulting firm had done list swaps with a bunch of different organizations, and they found that basically the names that they got by partnering up with other organizations performed a lot better than names that they got through other channels. Now, as always, your mileage may vary, but the great thing about a list swap is you generally don't have to pay money, you just have to spend time, right? So particularly for smaller organizations or for organizations that are really aggressively trying to reach out, this may be something to consider. So let's talk activist communities, and we'll go back to the chat and check on any comments there. So Civic Shout, you heard from today. So these activist communities like Civic Shout or Care2, you basically run a sponsored petition or some kind of sponsored action, and people sign up for your list from that petition or action. Now, Care2's been around a long time. Civic Shout has been around, I guess, by now, 8 or 10 years, perhaps. Change.org used to do this, but they closed down their email acquisition business largely. I think it still does survive in some form, but it's not what it used to be. But there are, besides these, petition sites, activist communities, there are other groups that you can reach out through, like Daily Kos, the long-term liberal blogging community. Democratic campaigns have been paying to recruit people there for quite a long time. Other groups that have big email lists or publications like Mother Jones, right? Running an ad in an email newsletter or, basically buying access to the list some other way may be a really good way to leverage the work that this other group has already done to build. The Republicans for a long time were advertising on things like the Drudge Report, and Human Events, various conservative media outlets. I don't know if left-leaning nonprofits are quite as much in the habit of doing that. But you can also think about other online communities, Substacks, podcasters that reach audiences that you need to reach, and perhaps want to try to recruit through. I'm going to talk a little bit more about influencer outreach down the road. But think about if someone else has already stocked the pond with fish, the fishing's likely to be better then. But there are vendors who will sell you. For instance, a friend of mine bought a list of people who had opened an email on a topic related to what his nonprofit was about, but they had not expressly opted into his list. So he got those email addresses and he emailed them and he got almost no response at all. So make sure, as Josh alluded to earlier, that you are getting opt-in only. Do not let someone sell you a list of people who might be interested, because then you will be a spammer. So let's go before we get into Facebook here, let's check the chat real quick. Do you have any thoughts on sending individual personalized emails to members of an acquired list for discovery purposes? Again, if you're sending to people who have not opted in, you're likely to get a very high spam rates, right? You're going to get a low open, nothing is certain in this world, but you're likely to get a low open rate and a high spam complaint rate. I would be very wary of emailing a purchase list, period. However, as I alluded to before, you can certainly use that purchase list uploaded to Facebook as a custom audience and target people that way. And you can run ads on Facebook. This is from Doctors Without Borders. I've tended to click on a lot of Ukraine-related content on Facebook, so it knows that I am interested. I am also receiving a lot of Facebook ads about donating to help cats in Ukraine, because probably I click on more cat-related content that is entirely healthy for anyone. So I'm being targeted that way, right? This is interest targeting one way or another. But you can certainly post appeals like this directly to Facebook organically and as an ad. The problem with doing it organically is that our sort of logistical, take this action, give us money sort of content, not a whole lot of people typically like and share it. So organically, it tends not to perform well, certainly compared to like a red meat petition that might, really spark people's emotions. I do want to point out that anytime you're trying to build lists, hitting the heart and not the head is usually the way to go. But you can certainly run ads, and you can certainly try to get your supporters, as I mentioned earlier, try to get your supporters to share your content on Facebook, Blue Sky, Twitter, whatever they use themselves, TikTok, if you can send them videos. So this is, the ad, just like we talked about. You'd be clicking through to a landing page. Now, the landing page on your own website, usually. Facebook has a native tool called lead generation ads. And as you might guess, they were designed for sales leads, for salespeople. But the advantage of lead gen ads, well, there are a couple of advantages. One is that people stay within Facebook as they fill out the form, right? And when someone chooses to act on your lead generation ad, sign your petition, for instance. I was using them a few years ago for Save the Children Action Network. We were getting petition signatures around early childhood education. Someone will flick through 2 or 3 screens on Facebook to verify the information, but they basically can join your list right from Facebook. And frequently you can integrate that with Every Action or Action Network or the CRM that you're using, so that someone flows directly into your database, so there's no delay in reaching them. If you have a welcome series trigger, a trigger for a welcome series set up, someone could go straight from your lead generation ad into your database and start receiving your messages right away. The thing is that none of this is perfect, and as always, your mileage may vary. I know that plenty of organizations will try to will do both. They will run an ad that is linking to something on their website, and then alongside that, they'll run lead generation ads, and then they will try to see if there is a difference in performance and cost. And sometimes it turns out that just running an ad that links to something on your own website will outperform the lead gen ads. I don't know if anyone has figured out a rhyme or reason for that, but it is something that we see in the wild. And if you're going to be doing this stuff at scale, it's probably worth testing. So you would not so much an A/B test, but you would test the two acquisition channels versus each other. And with Facebook and many of these other online communities, you've got all kinds of targeting. You can do this with Civic Shout or Care2, for instance. You can say, I need people from Alabama, or I need people from this one city, right? So you can geo-target your outreach. You can do the same thing on Facebook, of course. You can say, I need to reach people in, for instance, Michigan only. You can also do interest targeting. Now, the interest targeting options are a lot more limited than they used to be. You can do demographic targeting there. The Facebook really encourages you nowadays to use their Advantage Plus, which is basically using AI to try to figure out who in the broader audience, the broader Facebook community, is going to respond to your content. Your mileage may vary, as always. Like, for instance, if you're doing voter outreach, Advantage Plus is going to put your content in front of a bunch of people who aren't registered, right? Because it's not distinguishing. If you're doing voter contact, you're probably going to, want to do a custom audience from a van export or from purchase data, so that you're only running ads at people who could, for instance, actually vote. But it is, I've been reading more and more that interest targeting simply isn't working as well as it used to, and that trying the Advantage Plus targeting. So in this case, you would set some interests, like earlier last year, I was recruiting commercial fishermen in a series of ports along America's coast. For a marine conservation organization, right? So I was targeting people who either listed commercial fishing as their occupation, or Facebook had indicated that they have an interest in it. So now I might try, one set of ads that targeted those interests, and another set of ads that targeted those interests, but also added the Advantage Plus targeting. Now, I've alluded to custom audience targeting quite a bit. I'm going to walk through a good use case in just a sec. But it is custom audience is just a list of people, and you're going to need some kind of identifiers for them. Email and cell phone numbers are ideal. But even if you just have name and address, it's a start. And you upload that to Facebook or to a lot of other platforms, and they will attempt to match every record, every person on your list. They'll try to match it with a user of their platform. But you can also do lookalike targeting. So for instance, you could upload your donor list and push the lookalike button in Facebook. And for instance, perhaps target the 2% of Facebook users who are most like the people on your list, right? Your existing donors. This is people who are like them based on all of the things anyone has ever done on Facebook, right? That's kind of creepy, but it can be effective. As always, though, you'll want to run some tests to see, like, for instance, with that Save the Children campaign I was running a few years ago, we found that a 2% lookalike didn't perform as well as a 4% lookalike. So, we just, ran two different campaigns testing, two different targeting strategies, and one of them clearly outperformed the other. And then, as we'll discuss, you can do behavioral and engagement targeting. So let's kind of work through that. So retargeting is targeting based Facebook behavior or based on behavior on your website. If you install what's called a Facebook pixel on your website, then you can create Facebook audiences based on that. Like, one use that organizations that recruit people or have online donors at scale, I've heard of groups that will create an audience that includes people who went to the donation page, but who did not go to the thank you page. So they went to the donation page, but they didn't actually make a donation. And you might target them with a completion ad, right? Basically, oh, by the way, we're still here. Would you like to give us money? So that someone who maybe got interrupted or the phone rang or they got a text message and completely forgot to finish the process to try to prompt them to do it. But you could also target, for instance, people who landed on a particular piece of content on your website. You could try targeting them with Facebook ads afterwards. Something that we'll discuss in a second. The Trump campaign in 2016 did it at a vast scale. The Facebook pixel is pretty straightforward to install. You have to do some setup on Facebook's end, but the actual code is a lot like putting like Google Analytics or something like that into your website. So it's pretty straightforward, but you do have to set up whatever the triggers are in Facebook so that the audience will actually get created. And here, this is how lightning can strike twice. Yes. So we've got retargeting, Facebook pixels. Now, lookalike targeting is, what we were discussing a second ago, where you're trying to find people who are like the people on your list. So here's, how we might combine these tactics. So we upload a list to Facebook as custom audience, create a lookalike audience, target ads at the lookalikes, and then we might as people give money through this campaign, we might create a new lookalike audience based on the people who go to the landing page, right? Or we could create a new lookalike audience based on people who sign up via the ads. You could either do that through the pixel, or you could just upload the new signups as a new custom audience, right? But this way you get sort of constant feedback loops that as more people take the action, you are able to recruit people who look more like them. And there are plenty of consulting firms that would be very happy for you to hire them to do this, but you can also just do it internally yourself. And so large scale micro targeting, there are a lot more limits on this than there used to be, but that's Brad Parscale, the guy who was the digital director for Trump 2016, and at least briefly was functionally the first digital campaigner to run a presidential campaign. But in 2016, they ran as many as 100,000 or 200,000 ad variations in a single day, and would have people clicking through to content on different topics. And then they automated the process of creating lookalike audiences and custom audiences based on very small numbers of people going to particular pieces of content. And then you would follow up with them with targeted content based on what they had responded to in the first place. I remember a quote, something like, there are a whole lot of people who are interested in infrastructure spending in South Georgia, but Facebook would let us find them. Now, Facebook has limited the number of ad variations you could run at any given time, so you certainly can't run at the scale that they did. But this idea of dangling content out in front of people as bait, and then if they like it or share it or click on it, using that as the basis for people who engage with that content, using that as the basis for a new custom audience, that can be quite powerful. Again, if you're a small scale organization, you're probably not going to be doing this in the same way. But if you have the resources and you're really interested in reaching into a lot of different niches, it might be something that you try. So let me check the comment real quick here. Some good questions in the chat so far. How much does all this Facebook targeting cost if we try it in-house at a minimum for it to be worth it? Well, you're really going to be looking at what does it cost to recruit a person, right? So if you go to Care2 or Civic Shout, they will give you, I don't know what the rates are at the moment. They will give you a hard number. We will, if you pay us, $10,000, we can guarantee you X number of people who meet the criteria you've set will join your list. I think most of us are aiming for like $1, $2, $3 per acquisition. So Facebook targeting, the targeting doesn't cost anything. Running the ads is the cost. And the good thing about doing it on Facebook is that you'll learn very quickly whether your ads are succeeding or not. You spend a couple of $100 and nobody signs up, something's not working right. You spend a couple of $100 and 200 people sign up, you're doing great. Although I would continue to refine as much as possible based on testing. So I think the first thing is to set your own benchmarks. What are you trying to spend to acquire a new person? You might look back at your average donations per list member for the past couple of years and use that to try to establish an internal benchmark. But it's an excellent question. Like I said, the good thing is that with Facebook and some of these other channels, you'll find out fast whether you're actually doing it cost effectively. Oh my God, we're already over an hour. No wonder we're starting to lose people. So grass tops recruiting, I just wanted to put up this example, and we normally think of Facebook for grassroots recruiting, but in these cases, we were trying to recruit for a project a few years ago. We were trying to recruit business owners. And again, it was interest targeting. And in this case, the field team would actually look at each of these individual people and decide whether to reach out to them directly via direct message on Facebook. So, and similarly, grass tops, you can try LinkedIn targeting, which can be very powerful if you're trying to recruit within particular professions. Now, you can obviously do this organically, but LinkedIn does have advertising options. This is an ad I ran for National Whistleblowers Center. Unfortunately, recruiting whistleblowers was a little bit of a hard ask for LinkedIn ads. We really needed an easier action for someone to take. So in this case, it didn't really work, but we also found that out quickly enough to not spend that much money on it. So, but if you're trying to recruit, particularly in different professions or workplaces, this may be something that you can try. Now, influencers, micro influencers and macro influencers. I'll give an example. A friend was working with a Asian American Pacific Islander community, an organization on the West Coast, and there was a video gamer who streamed his sessions on Twitch, on the streaming platform Twitch, and he had a lot of followers. And he donated 24 hours of his time to this organization. So he played straight through 24 hours and talked up the organization while he was doing it. And they ended up raising, I think, about $100,000, right? So if you can find influencers, people on TikTok or Instagram who organically already support your issues, send them a DM, try to reach them. I was doing blogger relations trainings almost 20 years ago, and it is a lot like traditional media outreach that you're DMing someone behind the scenes rather than, using an ad or something like that. There are paid platforms out there. Social Current is one. Social Currant. People First is another. They have recruited a lot of sometimes big, but also a lot of smaller or community level influencers who are open to progressive messaging. And you can support them while they spread the word about your organization or your campaign. Now, the trick with the influencer outreach, sometimes you'll hear, oh, influencer outreach is replacing advertising. Problem is being at scale all the way down ballot or down to community organizations, right? That it can be very hard for a tiny organization or a tiny campaign to go out and try to recruit big name influencers. But what you can do is look for folks, if you're a local campaign or a local organization, start asking the people you work with, who do they listen to? Who are local folks that are on Instagram or on Facebook or on Substack that maybe a little more approachable than someone with a national following. The local political columnist, the local restaurant reviewer, on TikTok, that kind of thing. But for the national organizations, again, you might look for people that have covered your issues, that your particular issue niche in the past, and try reaching out to them directly. I think organic, someone who's really passionate about your cause is ideal, but we can't always find that in the places that we need. So thinking about a social current or a People First, or there are several other platforms like that, maybe something a way to go. Now, there's another advertising system out there, programmatic. These Basically you target a person rather than a platform. So these are the kind of ads, the Zappos ads that you used to follow around, right? If you went to Zappos.com, you would see their ads all over the place. Programmatic advertising for political and advocacy purposes runs on the same, commercial backbone. But like you see it for political campaigns. I've done a lot of work with it to build name recognition for local candidates. In theory, you could also try to do it for list building, but I have been told and have found out that it can be pretty tough to get people to convert from a programmatic ad. I just wanted to put it out there so that folks know about it. But Facebook, list swaps, influencer outreach, dedicated activist communities are probably going to be a better bet for most of us. Although, sometimes it may well be worth trying. I did for an immigration group a year or two ago. I did run some programmatic banner ads that were targeting Latinos in the District of Columbia and the adjoining counties in Maryland and Virginia. And we did get some event signups from that. So certainly there are times when it may work. So I want to give an example. This is a hometown project that I've been lucky enough to work with the last few election cycles. Don't do a ton of list building with them, but I want to mention the multi-channel aspect that, here they would recruit celebrities who had grown up in targeted state legislative districts, in this case in Michigan, get them to do videos for the Democratic candidate. And then we would get those videos out via Facebook ads, targeting custom audiences, via organic social media, amplified by the candidates themselves and folks, activists locally. And we would also run a lot of programmatic advertising targeting specific segments of the voter file. And the ideal is that these things reinforce each other. And, people don't always think about this, but, you know, online ads can help support your offline work, right? Running Facebook ads, if you have a list of people that you're going to canvass next week, running Facebook ads promoting your campaign or your organization or your issues can prime the pump, having people ready, already aware when your canvasser knocks on the door. So thank you. I hope that this has been helpful. We ran a little over time here. A big thanks to Josh and Civic Shout for helping to spread the word about this and partnering. I'm always happy to chat. Let me check the comments here just to see if we have one more question. Oh, it's a thank you. Thank you so much. I'm always happy to toss around ideas, so feel free to drop me a line. I'm updating the epolitics.com and the epolitics Substack regularly now. So I really encourage you to sign up for the Substack to find out about future trainings and articles that are being out there regularly. So we have some good stuff about how Democrats should be using social media right now, for instance. So thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you at the next training. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I'll be sending around a link to the recording of this, the YouTube version, once we're done and once I can get it uploaded and annotated. All right. So thank you again, and I'll see you next time.